Yes, no?
That's fine, I can pull the account
Like 18 something, yeah.
and do the history check on it.
So let's do 9 on that one,
And then 10 on the other.
and then 10 on the other,
And
right?
like you said,
And that'll be closer to what?
so basically
was the actual?
$19,000 and then
Right.
somewhere in between.
Okay, and then that moves us down to grant income. So we do have a grant that's coming in, but it's gonna go, Williamsville's the lead agency, the $2 million. And so they would account for it essentially. So grant income, trying to think what other grants we would potentially be getting.
Is that for the
Mine's
trail,
up.
is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
see, like 10.
the
So
bike,
then we'll pay them and then we'll.
no, so I wanna talk to you about the bike trail, cause this is a big deal.
Big short.
Yeah, this is a big deal. So the bike trail. This bike trail was started back in, Bill McCarty was still the mayor when we first started talking about this for Williamsville. And then Tom became mayor and we've worked on it. There's been so many bureaucratic red tape issues, or the Great Recession, or the state budget crisis, or bats, native species bats, things to literally delay and slow this project down, funding issues, you name it. So anyway, fast forward like, whatever it's been, almost 10 years. We were awarded a grant for phase 1 and 2 of the engineering. So it's like $269,000 to do the phase 1 and phase 2 engineering for the bike trail. Then we were actually successful in getting a grant for the bike trail. The bike trail, ITEP, Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, the bike trail is actually an 80-20 split, or an amount up to and not to exceed $2 million. So the bike trail grant funding that the bill, and it's a joint project. That's one of the reasons why we were successful. But the bike trail, the lead agency on it, because one entity has to be the lead agency, so we let Williamsville take the lead on it, or they did. We were a party to it. But it's a Williamsville-Sherman bike trail, 50-50 split, directly right in the middle of it, in terms of ownership. But like I said, they're the lead agency, so the grant is actually issued to them, and that's for $2 million, because the bike trail actually comes in at an amount higher than $2 million. So we got the full $2 million. But the reverse and flip side of that is we're on the hook for everything over and above that. The bike trail was bid most recently, and the bid opening was like 3 weeks ago. The low bidder on it, that's a whole nother issue in and of itself. The low bidder is Autobahn. They're a qualified bidder with the state of Illinois. For us, we would not consider them a qualified bidder because of the workmanship and the lack of things that they failed to address at Village Park. And the things that, most people don't see, but we know aren't sufficient to, what the contract was, what their duties and performances were supposed to be. And so we're actually in a dispute we're holding some revenues from them right now. And they're fighting to try and get those. But we've identified a certain number of items that need to be addressed and fixed, or potentially could, have issues with it, and so we've been holding that. And that's a whole nother issue in and of itself in terms of the legal side and the administrative side. So Autobahn's the low bidder. Their bid came in at almost $2.9 million. The next low bidder is Halverson, and they were like $80,000 higher. There's no reason that, I shouldn't say that. IDOT says that we've asked our engineers about trying to kick Autobahn and not But then the flip side of that is you'd be taking the next, what we would consider the qualified bidder of Halverson to get the project, but it's $80,000 higher. But at that point, it's like, you know, I'm not saying it's a rounding error, but it's not that significant when you're dealing with what we think in terms of the workmanship of Audubon. Now, somewhat in their defense, they have fired all the old people and started with new crews or whatever, and that's another issue in itself as well. So, that bid opening was like 3 weeks ago. We have to make a decision by the 27th of this month. And I just talked to Mayor Yoakley. I was actually gonna pipe him in and put him on speakerphone, because I want you to almost hear it from his mouth. But if we choose to go forward as the village board, the village of Williamsville is on the hook for half of that additional amount, and we're on the hook for that additional amount. It's around 2.9 million, but there's gonna be some additional engineering and stuff that goes in there, so it's slightly over $1 million that needs to be split between the two towns, Village of Williamsville, Village of Sherman, in order for the bike trail to actually move forward and the construction to start literally here this fall, or let's say something gets delayed next spring. But everything is set up and ready to go. I forwarded you guys that email. So I set a meeting with Leader Brady, Senator Brady, and I set a meeting with Representative Butler. All of us were to meet last Wednesday. Well, I actually set that meeting out just because of, you know, the potential exposure to COVID and staying away. And that's why I didn't attend that meeting, but Mr. Stratton attended it, as well as Mayor Yoakley, our engineer, who's also the village's engineer, or for Village of Williamsville's engineer, Mike Trello. What Mayor Yoakley and I are working on is additional state funding, because that's a huge amount of money to actually come up with, to go forward with on this bike trail, especially based on what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
Fall off in revenues. So we're trying to, and not dipping into our reserves too, because we've been trying and we've been doing this over a number of years, building our reserves, not essentially for a pandemic, but what if like there's a fire at County Market? What if there's a fire at Carter Brothers? What if there's no revenues coming in for 6 to 8 months while the place is rebuilt or whatever? Then what happens to the village budget? Then we really tap into the reserves. So to tap reserves now, it's debatable whether we should, and that's what the board needs to figure out. But aside from that, we're trying to soften the blow to both villages by getting some money that may potentially be sitting out there that's allotted to the caucuses, like when they did do all this bonding and the capital plan and all that stuff, and redirect and like, because that is a project that's, you know, a lot of people want. We've been waiting 10 years for. A lot of work has gone into it, but at the same time, we got to make tough decisions on, you know, where do these dollars actually come from. And so I set this meeting up, and I wasn't able to actually attend it, but I sent Mike, and they all met up in Williamsville. We've written a joint letter to Ameren, because they are a huge beneficiary in this as well, because it's a path that they can actually drive their trucks on. It's engineered to be able to hold 80,000-pound trucks. So we think, and Mayor Oakley thinks that, you know, they're gonna pony up a fair amount. Maybe 200,000, hopefully, 250, 260. That's the ask. We're trying to get our local senator and our local representative to potentially find $250,000 to $500,000. But absent that stuff happening, I gotta tell you, a decision, and you've seen in that email a debrief of what actually took place in the meeting, and there was no better way for it to be explained than for me to forward it on to you guys. We gotta make a decision. I talked to Mayor Yoakley, and by the 27th of this month, if not, it's gonna go away. here's the flip side of this all. We're not just gonna get off the hook without paying anything. We've already paid a significant portion of dollars towards this. If we let it go away, we both will pay we both will have basically thrown away $186,000 in costs that we've already done. Then, there's another aspect of it where if we do not accept the bids and just totally give away this grant, it's gonna go somewhere else. But IDOT can charge you for all of the engineering costs that went into all of this, which will happen. They also can assess interest on that. And our likelihood of being successful in future grants is gonna be diminished greatly because we just gave up a $2 million grant for, you know, a pretty significant project that everybody's been wanting and working through. But the reality of it is where do we come up with these revenues in order to fund our portion of that bike trail? And our portion is gonna be around $508,000, I believe. Williamsville 508, us 508. So just think about $500,000 in terms of needed revenues from the village of Sherman in order to make the bike trail happen. Now, I gotta tell you this, and if you want me to, I can get Larry Oakley on the phone, but if you're comfortable just me telling you, his board actually gave approval, gave him authorization to say yes to it. Mayor Oakley wants this project very, very bad to go through, and I do too.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a great addition to our communities. He would hate to see us have spent all that money only to lose out on it. He would also hate to see us not be very successful in the future in future grants. He would hate to see, he'd basically hate to see the project go away. And like I said, he's out of town right now, but he said, call me if you want me to explain, you know, where the village of Williamsville's at. And he will, and why he is, because I'd asked him to come here and just say, hey, I want you to kind of talk to the board and express your interest in us both moving forward regarding this. But we're starting to talk about the expenditure side of things though, and that's one of the things I told you guys a couple weeks back and stuff, that there's some serious tough decisions that are on the horizon. How do we fund it? There's a whole bunch of different ways to fund it. Well, we've got falling revenues because of, the current climate and things that are going on. So is there a bond issuance that is done going forward like we did for roads? Is that a component of it? Last time we did like $1.5 million. But here's the other thing, in terms of